Welcome to the South Carolina Teaching Standards, or SCTS 4.0 teacher training. This self-guided training is designed to provide an overview of the SCTS 4.0 rubric that will be used to evaluate and provide feedback to South Carolina teachers. This training will not prepare participants to serve as trainers or evaluators. If you wish to serve as a trainer or evaluator, or have been asked to serve on a training or evaluation team, you must attend the 3-day face-to-face training. Check with your college or university faculty or school or district administrator for more details about the 3-day evaluator training. You will need the following materials: Handout 1, the SCTS 4.0 rubric; Handout 2, the Instruction Domain Activity Sheet; Handout 3, the Environment Domain Connections Sheet; Handout 4, the Planning and Instruction Domains Connection Sheet; and note-taking materials. To download the handouts, click on the icons next to Handouts 1 through 4. Once you have all of the materials, move to the next slide. During this online training, you will take an in-depth look into the instruction, environment, and planning domains, make connections across those 3 domains, and review the observation process in South Carolina. By the end of this training, you will develop a procedural knowledge and understanding of the South Carolina teaching standards and begin to move to a conceptual understanding, and gain an understanding of the evaluation process, expectations, and protocols that will be used by evaluators. This rubric was selected after a stakeholder group of educators reviewed a variety of validated practice rubrics. The rubric is aligned to the ADEPT Performance Standards, the Profile of the South Carolina Graduate, and NTASC standards. The South Carolina Teaching Standards 4.0 rubric will better support educators with specific feedback related to professional practice. This tool is designed to assess a teacher's professional practice and hosts 4 domains: instruction, planning, environment, and professionalism. Each domain has indicators and specific descriptors that differentiate levels of performance. Professionalism is slightly different, using a combination of the teacher and administrator's reflection. Let's take a closer look at the parts of the rubric. The domains are the big buckets. Remember, there are 4 domains in the SCTS 4.0 rubric. We are currently looking at the instruction domain. On the left of the rubric are the indicators. Indicators are the specific elements of practice. As mentioned earlier, each domain has a set of indicators. The indicator highlighted on this slide is standards and objectives. Below the domain are the performance levels. The 4 performance levels are the biggest difference from the ADEPT performance standards. We'll take a closer look at the performance levels on the next slide. Descriptors, found in the middle of the rubric, describe what performance looks like and sounds like at each performance level. There are 4 levels of performance in the expanded ADEPT evaluation system: exemplary, proficient, needs improvement, and unsatisfactory. Notice instruction becomes increasingly student-centered as we move left. 3, or proficient, is rock-solid teaching. We live at 3 and visit 4. For example, Serena Williams is one of the best tennis players ever. She doesn't hit an ace with every serve. She loses points and games, even though she's a pro. She still has a coach, and her game continues to evolve. This tool gives us feedback about our lessons so that we can continue to improve and deepen our practice over the course of what we hope will be very long careers inside the classroom. Now that you understand how the rubric is organized, let's take a closer look at the instruction, environment, and planning domains, and make connections across the domains. During this portion of the training, you will need Handout 1, the SCTS 4.0 rubric, Handout 2, the Instruction Domain Activity Sheet, Handout 3, the Environment Domain Connections Sheet, Handout 4, Planning and Instruction Domains Connection Sheet, a highlighter, and materials to take notes. When you have all of these resources, move to the next slide to begin the activity. Now you will spend some time reviewing the indicators in the instruction domain. Take out Handout 1, the SCTS 4.0 rubric, and Handout 2, the Instruction Domain Activity Sheet. For this activity, you should read the descriptors in the proficient level, highlight keywords in the descriptors, think about what the descriptors look and sound like in practice for students and for teachers, and determine the essence of the indicator. In other words, if you had to summarize the indicator, what would you tell teachers the indicator is all about? Take a look at the examples shown. Notice the keywords of the descriptors are highlighted in the rubric. This is an example of what you will do for the remaining indicators in the instruction domain. The next slide shows an example of how to complete the activity sheet. Let's take a look at the example provided in Handout 2. Notice we filled in column 1 with the keywords we highlighted on the rubric. Then we thought about what the descriptors might look like and sound like in practice and recorded it in the second column of the handout. This step is important as it helps clarify what evidence can be collected to support the indicators. In the third column of Handout 2, we included the essence of the indicator. So, if we needed to summarize the standards and objectives indicator, we would tell teachers the indicator is about alignment, expectations, and mastery. Now, take some time to complete the activity for the remaining instruction indicators on your own. After highlighting, remember to record your responses in each column of Handout 2. When you finish this activity, move to the next slide. After the training, you may want to take the time to reflect on this activity with other cooperating teachers and university supervisors, as rich discussions about the rubric can better assist with understanding and implementation. Now that you've had a chance to dig deeper into the instruction domain, let's take a look at the environment domain. We'll begin by looking at some of the research about the effect of classroom environment on instruction and student learning. Then you will have some time to examine the environment domain and make connections with the descriptors in the environment and instruction domains. Remember, this tool is research-based. Earlier, you looked at a body of research that supported the rubric as a whole. There is research specific to the importance of the environment domain as well. You as educators know these to be true. Students thrive in environments where they feel safe, nurtured, and respected. We work hard to build a community of thinkers, expressors, listeners, and learners. A community where kids and teachers care and wonder about each other's interests and ideas and take time to talk about them, think about them, and explore them. The classroom environment is fundamental to success and learning in a classroom. Classroom environment is much more than discipline and rules. We acknowledge that as beginning teachers, the environment domain might have been particularly challenging, one from which we reflected on a lot. If you are supporting a beginning or pre-service teacher, knowledge of this domain can support timely, relevant needs. As veteran educators, we would acknowledge that environment can pose a challenge when a seasoned teacher is placed in a new grade level, building, or contexts. To explore the environment domain, we are going to change up the approach. In the earlier activity, we did a looks like, sounds like approach. In this case, we are going to use our highlights to make connections to the instruction domain. You will need Handout 3, the Environment Connection Sheet, to complete this activity. Once you have this handout and the SCTS 4.0 rubric in front of you, move to the next slide. As you can see, There are connections with some of the descriptors in the environment indicator of the environment domain with descriptors in a few of the indicators in the instruction domain. Take a few moments to read through those connections. Now, make connections with the remaining indicators in the environment rubric and record your responses on Handout 3, the Environment Connections sheet. After the training, you may want to take the time to reflect on this activity with other cooperating teachers and university supervisors, as rich discussions about the rubric can better assist with understanding and implementation. The rubric is not a checklist, and we shouldn't think about the indicators and descriptors in isolation. As you study and apply the rubric, you will see connections between the domains. The SCTS 4.0 rubric is holistic. In order to use the rubric effectively, both the observer and those being observed have to see that each of the parts of each domain can only be understood when put in context of the whole. When we understand the holistic nature of the rubric, we can see that many of these parts have to be put in context with each classroom, and with reference to all the other parts that go into teaching. We've made clear connections between the environment and instruction domains. Evidence in the environment domain must be linked to the level or depth of student learning taking place in the classroom. There are two specific instruction domain indicators that link to the environment domain: thinking and problem solving. As we peer into the classrooms through a series of video field trips and watch for environment domain evidence, be thinking, is there truly a connection between the learning environment rubric and student thinking and problem solving? You are going to take a field trip into the classroom of a teacher. You will be watching 3 short video clips where you are going to observe specifically for environment indicators, but also want to be cognizant of those instruction domain connections. Remember, watch for the evidence that student learning is taking place. The video is approximately 4 minutes in length. Your mission is to look for evidence related to the environment domain and make connections to the instruction domain. Here are a couple of evidence collecting tips. It may be helpful for you to split the paper down the middle and label one side teacher and the other student. That way, when you observe something done by the teacher, you can directly connect it to the students. You may also want to make periodic timestamps to help you to determine pacing. While viewing the first clip, respond to the following questions. Are expectations high? Are expectations low? Is there any identified connection to the impact on the learning? When you are ready, move to the next slide in the presentation. Hover over the NIET logo on the video and press play to view the clip. When you've finished viewing the video clip, proceed to the next slide.
All right. Well, we already elected our person. Now, that kind of leads us into our lesson today. Okay? Our goal today, by the end of this lesson, is we want to be able to evaluate situations from different perspectives or point of views. And believe it or not, we actually did that a little bit in our hook. We looked at a situation and we looked at it from different point of views. And then we also want to identify how others may feel in a given situation or scenario. Did we just do that? Yeah. We didn't have just one point of view. We had how many? 4. We had 4 point of views. So yeah, we were looking at how others may feel. And then also we're going to apply looking at different perspectives to our daily life. And this kind of went with our heart-to-heart that we had last week, and why it's important to think of the other person before you say something. Okay? All right. So today for our GLE, it's make simple inferences from the point of view of another character. So I'm going to give you some letters from Dear Mrs. LaRue, our story this week, and you're going to use clues from the story and what is in your schema, things that you already know, and you're going to come up with how another character may feel. Because we know how Ike, the main character, feels, don't we? He puts it on paper. He lets us know how he's feeling. What you're going to do today is you're going to look at Ike's letter and you're going to respond to him, but from a different character's point of view. All right? We're also going to organize our thoughts and ideas from different points of views to persuade our audience. We're going to start with a 4-square today to brainstorm our ideas, and then tomorrow we're going to put it into proper, friendly letter format. Are there any questions? We're good? Okay, well, let's roll. I do. I'm going to model for you what I expect of you. Okay, we're going to do some group work in just a few minutes, but I need to model for you first. Okay, and guess what? We're working in groups, so guess what you get to do? Talk. Okay, we're going to help each other out here. You're going to talk amongst your groups, and you're going to talk about how might the neighbors, some of you might have the guards, how might the guards respond to Ike? Okay, one group even has Mrs. Klondike, and she looks so sweet, but he makes her out to be so mean. All right, so you're going to respond. You get to put your name tag on, read, think about how this person might answer. You guys can even change your voices if you want. How's that sound? I know how some of you like acting. You can even change your voice if you want. And then I even have jobs for you. So on your index card, when I give you your number, I want you just to write it on your index card. Now this index card we're also going to use as our exit ticket at the end, and it's also going to be our reminder throughout our lesson, because each person is going to have a certain job. 1, write it. 2, 3, 4. So Kendrick, when I say the magic word, you can go to your group and work with them. Are there any questions before we start, kiddos? What? All right. We're ready to roll? All right, I'm going to set my timer. I'm going to give you about maybe 10 minutes? Yeah, I'll give you 10 minutes. All right, to go ahead and brainstorm this. If you finish early, I want you guys to practice how that person might say the comment, because guess what we're going to do? We're going to come back together as a group, and you guys get to share what you all wrote. Okay, so you guys can kind of rehearse it together as a group. You ready, Kendra? All right, cheeseburger, cheeseburger. Go ahead and begin, guys.
Now prepare to view the second video clip. While viewing the clip, respond to the following. Do behaviors allow for students to be on task? Do behaviors disrupt learning? Is there any identified connection to the impact on the learning? When you are ready, move to the next slide in the presentation. Hover over the NIET logo on the video and press play to view the clip. When you've finished viewing the video clip, proceed to the next slide.
Okay. So who's person number 1? Okay, so you're person number 1. And what is your job right now? What's your role?
Like the ingredients and the first comment.
Okay. Have you guys read the letter yet?
Yes.
Oh, you already read it. Okay, good. Good, good. All right, so you're going to read your comment to the group? What comment number? What is the first comment?
Right here. I started in his file, so he started to list.
So who's your Dr. Wilfrey? What would Dr. Wilfrey say about Ike limping like that? Well, first Ike said it. You think he's a faker? Why?
Because on the rest of the letter said I felt queasy, so I barely ate dinner except for the yummy gravy. Because he probably ate all the stuff that was good, but the stuff that was nasty he didn't eat.
Have you ever done that? I've done that before too. I used to do that when I was younger. Okay. So you think he's faking? Do any of you guys? Do you think he's faking, Caleb? Do you think Ike's really sick? I love the vocabulary. Doing that inventive spelling too.
UNC. BECAUNC. No, erase that. That's how you spell because. Erase it for you. We forgot that.
Okay. No. Hold on. We need our roles. Who's person 1? Then she needs to be writing. And you can help her out.
Next, you will view the third video clip. While viewing the clip, respond to the following. How is the environment stimulating learning? How is the environment impeding the learning? What are the identified connections to the thinking and problem-solving indicators? When you are ready, move to the next slide in the presentation. Hover over the NIET logo on the video clip and press play to view. When you've finished viewing the clip, proceed to the next slide.
Okay, so what are you guys saying? What would the guard say back to Ike then?
The reason why we want you to learn.
Okay. Wait, now you said do that. What's do that? The reason why we do that. Do the keep it shuffle? Do...
It's the reason why we say good. Do that because like we're saying, we're always calling.
What's do that though?
We're talking about that. Do that.
So what would you put? The reason why we...
Say good dog.
Make sure you get that down. Because remember, we might not necessarily know that the guard said this. Okay, so you want to make sure you repeat that. So the reason why we said good dog and was because. Okay, so add that, no. Are you number one, Ethan? Well, maybe you can let Deja use that. How's that? Okay, so let's make sure and help her out as she writes that. Kendrick, is that your hand or are you stretching? Okay. Do your inventive spelling, sound it out, and when you go into your rough draft with your letter, we can look up the spelling. So y'all are coming from the neighbor's point of view? Wait, Nigel, come here, because I want to hear what y'all have to say. So you're saying that the neighbors complained about Ike's howling in the middle of the night, and what would the neighbors respond to that as?
Well, I said that they would have wrote that, dear Ike, we were complaining about your howling because we were trying to sleep.
I think that's a good
And
response.
then this one is, we woke you up with our loud vacuum because we were trying to clean up the house so it won't be dirty, and we put it on high by accident.
I like it. I like it. And I know I've had it before where I've had my neighbor's dog wake me up in the middle of the night. So I'm definitely connecting. Now make sure you share that third comment with your group though, so they can all hear it and they can all contribute to it.
Now, on to the fourth video clip. While viewing the video, respond to the following. How is the culture stimulating learning? How is the culture impeding the learning? What are the identified connections to the thinking and problem-solving indicators? When you are ready, move to the next slide in the presentation. Hover over the NIET logo on the video and press play to view the clip. When you've finished viewing the video, proceed to the next slide.
What did we do? I need to see pencils. You can put your pencils down. I want to see who's ever in charge of the paper right now, whoever that may be, I want to see fist to 5. How many more minutes might you need to finish this up? Fist meaning we're done. We don't need any more time. One finger, our group needs about 1 more minute, 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes, 4 more minutes, 5 more minutes. Now, a little hint, if you're already on the third comment, you probably need maybe only 2 more minutes, okay? If you're on that last box, you probably need about 1 more box. So show me, whoever has the paper in front of you, I see a 5, a 3, a 1, a 2, and a 3. I'm going to give you guys 3 more minutes. My group that has 5, we need to speed it up a little, okay? Because we're about to share. Okay. Now you get to share. Now you can either stand up or you can just pass the paper. You can read with different voices if you want, or you can just read. It's up to you. But make sure you do it loud and proud so everyone can hear. Now remember, eyes and ears, we're being good listeners, because put yourself in the presenter's shoes. You would want people listening to you, right, Ethan? Okay. All right, go ahead and share loud and proud.
Dear Ike, we hope you do better and don't chase us anymore.
You were being a little melodramatic about escaping in the middle of January and crying.
I've been really sick for 3 whole days. We don't appreciate you saying that. Next time, ask.
And before Ty reads, who thinks that they can predict whose point of view they're coming from? Elisa? The Hibbins cats. All right, let's see if she's right.
We wish you very good luck when you get out of obedience school. We will treat you better. Yours truly, the Hibbins cat. Meow.
All right, give them a round of applause. Good job, Gerald.
Let's review some of the evidence you collected about the environment of this classroom. In clip 1, the teacher reviews the expectations for the lesson and for each group. In clip 2, the teacher circulates around the room during group work and often gets on the student's eye level when talking to groups. She positions herself next to a group that she anticipates will need guidance. The teacher provides guidance by questioning the students in order to prompt student thinking and engagement. You can see that the other group is working independently. Finally, in clips 3 and 4, the teacher provides students with choices and time, which encourages respectful culture and supports environment. The teacher has set up interdependence. Their roles would not be accomplished without the relationships between the students within the groups. The environment, thinking, and problem solving are aligned and dependent on one another. If thinking and problem solving are high and the environment indicators are low, students are learning but possibly not up to their potential. In a positive environment, they could learn even more. If thinking and problem solving are low and the environment indicators are high, students are happy and the classroom is respectful, but the challenge is not there. The environment is positive, but not a learning environment. Earlier, you made connections with the instruction and environment domains. The next activity will help you to develop a deeper understanding of the planning domain and see the connections with the instruction domain. Another important connection with the rubric is the relationship between the planning and instruction domains. Remember, we just spent time connecting environment with instruction. Here is another relationship or example of the holistic nature of the rubric. In this section, we will focus on instructional plans, student work, and assessment. You will need the SCTS 4.0 rubric and handout 4. Planning and Instruction Connection Sheet. For this activity, you will read over the indicators, record your meaning statements for each indicator of the planning rubric, make connections to the instruction rubric, and record any questions you may have about the indicator. Look at the example shown in this slide. After reading the proficient column in the planning domain and connecting with keywords from the instruction domain, we crafted the meaning statement. Standards are written with clear, measurable objectives, sequenced appropriate for students and content. Now, take time to complete the chart on handout 2 with the student work and assessment indicators of the planning domain. After the training, you may want to take the time to reflect on this activity with other cooperating teachers and university supervisors, as rich discussions about the rubric can better assist with understanding and implementation. Planning evidence is typically captured in a pre-conference session, but can also be captured within a classroom observation. In a few moments, you will watch 2 video clips. The first clip shows the beginning of a 3rd grade math lesson. The second clip shows the end of that math lesson. The power comes from the actions of the students in response to the teacher. So, while viewing the 2 clips, look for what students do as a result of the teacher's actions. Have your planning domain in front of you and quickly review some of the keywords you see in each descriptor. If you found dividing your paper into 2 columns was helpful while viewing the previous video clips, please do so again to record what the teacher says and does and what the students say and do. When you are ready, move to the next slide in the presentation. Hover over the videos and press play to view each video clip. When you've finished viewing the 2 video clips, proceed to the next slide.
Alright, if you guys could all stop where you're at, put your pencils down, you kind of take your problem set out of this, and I would like one volunteer that would like us to look at their work and score it. Who is a volunteer that would be ready for us to score? Jaquan will probably like us to score. Okay. So if everyone could put everything down, eyes up here, and together we use our criteria to score Jaquan's work. After we score his, I'm going to have you pick one of your problems to score, then we're going to start our exit ticket and close out the lesson. So, how many points do you think we're going to score Jaquan's work out of? We already scored number 2. Let's do number 3. Okay? So I see Jaquan's already numbered his 1 through 4 he's going to score. What's the first thing we're going to look for? Did Jaquan annotate and restate this? What was his restate? He buys blank kilograms of coffee beans. So do we have evidence we can give him a point for criteria point 1? Yes. So next is number 1. He does get a point for that first one. Now number 2. What's number 2? What are we looking for to see if he did? What picture did he choose to draw? Is that alright? No. What is it? Tape diagram. Very good. He even labeled it. He says 6 groups, $24. That's an excellent job, Jaquan. So can we give him a point for that? Yes. If he would have done an array or a number bond, would we still give him a point? Yes. It doesn't have to be a specific picture, just one that represents the problem. Alright, what do we do for number 3? Write number 6 to represent the problem. What was the number sentence? He then took to the next level. What do you include as number sentence? Variable. Very good. So do we want a point for that? Yes. Okay, and then last one. What strategy did Jaquan use? Very good. And we got the answer of 24. That was the correct answer. So what would we score Jaquan's work? A 4. Excellent job, Jaquan. And we usually come up with a star and a stare, something he did well and something he could improve on. There's not really too much of a stare. The only thing I could think, Jaquan, I started to push some of those students to explain their work in this last box. If you finish your exit ticket early, you might push yourself to that, or to come up with a way to check this to make sure you got it correctly. If you guys can pick one of the problems you did, turn to one of the problems, the last one you fully completed, and score your work on the criteria. When you are done with that, take one of these papers on the top and you have 2 problems to do for your exit ticket. You have 10 minutes to solve those 2 problems in your exit ticket. Use the same criteria we had today. You can use my model up here. My group that I had at the carpet, Ronald, Micaiah, John, Jaquan, Kalia, and Draven. I do want you to use the strategy I taught you on your exit ticket, okay? Are there any questions what we're doing? Alright, please pick a problem of yours to score. Thank you, Jaquan, for letting us use yours. And then get started on your exit ticket.
Take a look at the evidence you collected from this classroom observation. What evidence of planning did you note while observing this classroom? Later on in the training, you will look at another area to capture evidence of planning. Now that we've made connections across the instruction, environment, and planning domains, let's spend some time reviewing the observation process in South Carolina. In South Carolina, teachers will receive both announced and unannounced observations. All announced observations will follow the POP cycle, which means there is a pre-conference, observation, and then a post-conference. You will receive additional information about the frequency of these observations and timeline from your college or university supervisor or your school or district administrator. We just identified evidence of planning within a classroom observation. Another area where planning evidence surfaces is in the pre-conference, where the evaluator engages the teacher in a discussion about the lesson plan and its relation to other lessons in that unit. The process that surrounds the use of this rubric is rich in feedback, specifically to grow and develop teachers in their craft. Think about how pre-conferences benefit the evaluator, teacher, and most importantly, the students. On the next slide, you will observe a pre-conference. The video clip length is 11 minutes, 9 seconds. When you are ready, move to the next slide in the presentation. Hover over the video and press play to view the clip. When you've finished viewing the video clip, proceed to the next slide.
Well, today I'm so glad that we could meet and talk a little bit because you're going to be setting the stage for me for the lesson I'm going to come and observe in your classroom, and I'm so looking forward to. I know during my walkthroughs I love coming into your room, so I'm looking forward to that. And before we get into that, Laura, I thought maybe we would talk just for a few minutes about your professional development and growth a little bit. So talk to me a little bit about the area you're working on and how you're trying to strengthen your professional practice.
Well, last time you observed me, we had a discussion about the planning dimension on the rubric, specifically instructional grouping. Mm-hmm. So I've really tried to make a point to consider all of my students' needs while creating my instructional groups. And then also, when students are in their instructional groups, making sure that their individual roles are well communicated and there's an understanding of those as they're working through the different activities.
So you've been working on those roles and responsibilities, and that planning dimension, and that's so important. And do you mind if I just jot a couple of notes? You know I'm old. I have to jot some things down. Thank you. So what are some of the activities that you've done to grow in this area? Because it sounds like you really have grown since our last conversation.
Well, not only myself, but I feel in my classroom, the environment has grown because of this. I've continued to implement the Kagan cooperative learning strategies throughout all the subjects, whether we're talking reading, social studies, science, or math. And I really like those structures because it gives the students a clear description of the roles and responsibilities that they're going to be encountering throughout, whatever lesson they're in. Yeah. Also, we have really been working on literature circles. We actually moved into those recently.
Excellent, excellent.
So working with those also gives the students that opportunity to have assigned roles and responsibilities, and it really has made them be more accountable with their learning and take responsibility for their learning. So
that's really good. So the students you've seen as a result of you trying some new things, the Kagan structures, making sure kids understand those expectations, and the literature circles, which I'm thrilled to hear that you're doing those, because those make such a difference, that your students are responding well to that. And the activities you mentioned are really good, and I know you even were going to go in and spend some time with Katie Cabina, and because she's always been so fluid in her grouping. And
right.
So, and I'm sure that was helpful as well.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about your students now. How have your students really benefited? We talked about them being engaged and that kind of thing, but how has it strengthened their achievement in this?
Well, as you know, I have a very diverse classroom.
Yes, you do.
So we have students with gifted IEPs and we have students with resource IEPs. We even have a student on a behavior plan.
Yeah.
So by setting those instructional roles out there and we practice them and model them, and we're continually going back and reviewing what's expected of them, it's really made them take the learning into their own hands and become more responsible with it and care about it. And it's almost like they really are invested in the learning. And that makes a world of a difference when they care. Because, I mean, I can go up there and do, cartwheels and stuff. It's not going to matter if they don't care and give an effort. So it's really put an ownership to their learning, I feel.
Yeah, so they're growing and learning because of your growth. Excellent, excellent. So how are you planning to assess your students in terms of their growth over time? You know, how are you taking that into account, and how are you involving your students in that process?
Well, we do data binders on a weekly basis. So basically with that data binder every Friday, across all the subjects, students have an opportunity to see what they've done in their weekly assessments, their benchmarks, and even classwork. And, you know, as we go through each one of those things, they graph their progress. And so I feel it opens up a communication between myself and my students, because they're self-monitoring their growth, and they know, oh, I struggled on this math test, or reading, oh, I got to make sure I'm answering both parts of my questions here. And so it opens that communication between my students and myself. But I also feel that it opens a communication wave with the parents. And so parents every week are seeing what their children are doing in the classroom, and the kids are able to communicate to their parents, I didn't do this well, or this well on this test because I didn't do this. So next time, Mom or Dad, I'm going to really make sure I focus on that. So it's just keeping track of those assessments as they come in, and I'm tracking them and they're tracking themselves. So
excellent. So I remember you talking a little bit about that data binder and how it was, going to be a big help to your students. So it's good to see that you're pushing that forward, and it's such a good communication tool for them.
Oh, it is. And it allows my students then to set goals for themselves too. So maybe they got an 80% on one test, then they know next week, well, I'm going to, try to get it up a little higher. So they work on setting those individual goals as well. Exactly.
Great to hear that. And I know that we've already had a conversation around the benchmarks and things that have come in recently as we progress monitor, and I know that your students are showing growth and moving towards those goals that was set in the school goal. So excellent job. Good to hear. Yay, working. Okay, so as we kind of shift gears, I want to get back to talking a little bit about the lesson that I have the privilege to get to come and observe with you, and you're going to really set that stage for me. So that when I come in, I have an idea. I've looked at your lesson plan. I have it here, but I really want you to talk to me a little bit about that lesson. And so in that lesson, what do you expect students to know and be able to do by the end of the lesson?
Well, with this lesson, I'm going to let you know now, it's going to require them to do some heavy thinking. We're basically going to take skills that we've been working on throughout this unit, which specifically has been character traits and different point of views. And now we've just kind of covered those on, in isolation and on a basic level. So what my goal is for the lesson that you're going to observe is that they're going to take their knowledge of character traits and point of view, and they're going to be able to combine that together to form inferences about why either a character might act a certain way or what they might say in a certain scenario. So we're going to be, pumping up that higher order thinking, but it's going to really require a lot of monitoring on my part to make sure that they have what they need to take that next step towards that higher order thinking with the inferencing. But by the end, I'm hoping that they're going to be able to take what they know of character traits and point of view and start looking at different scenarios in a story from a different character's point of view, and then kind of explain why they did something or what they would do next.
Yeah. And I know, we talked about as a faculty the importance of giving students those opportunities to really flex their brain a little bit, their muscle, and push themselves, with the curriculum and things in Texas that are coming out. It's going to be really important for us to push. So I want to see some smoke coming out their ears. Okay, so you talked a little bit about this. This lesson then is in the context of you've looked at point of view, you've looked at character traits, and now they're going to take that from a text that they've been reading, and they're going to make some inferences. So talk a little bit about how did you decide in this particular lesson about how to group your students? Because with these heavy-hitting skills that they're going to be using in this lesson, I know you're thinking about the best way to get them to work together.
Well, and it goes underneath looking at trying to plan those groups. So what I've really tried to do is it's on mixed ability levels. So with a skill that requires, the type of higher order thinking like inferencing, if I need some of my gifted or higher level students to kind of help guide some of their group members throughout that process, I'm really counting on them to do that. But I also just mixed them between boys and girls. And also another little goal that I'm hoping the kids take away from this lesson is being able to apply this to their lives in our classroom and outside of our classroom. So I even considered some personality when I place some of the students with certain students, because I'm really hoping that they're going to be able to stop and think sometimes about another person's point of view when they're out on that playground or they're out at the house. So I even considered the personality of some of my students when I was putting them in some of these groups.
Yeah, because when smoke's coming out their ears, they're definitely going to need to huddle together and help each other collaborate and learn together. So it's always important to think about that. And I know you do your heart-to-hearts, and you have a lot of conversations with your students already about working together and growing together. So it'll be interesting to see when the stress is on, when they have a tough task, how they respond to that. Is there anything as we're going through this lesson that you want me to be aware of, or some things that I need to be aware of in the lesson?
No, just that this is the first time that we're really kind of diving into this idea of taking two of those basic skills and forming inferences. So there might be some struggles along the way, but it's in the middle part of my unit. So we have time to go back and refine areas that need, refinement with it, or, I can reinforce areas with certain students that might need it. So just to kind of know that it is, because we've been working on that basic level and just those skills in isolation. So now to try to bring it all together should be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I can't wait to see. Okay, so I guess then, I'll just look forward to being there in the lesson tomorrow. And thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Take a few moments to reflect on these questions. What did you notice as you observed the pre-conference? How was this conversation helpful for the evaluator? How was the conversation helpful for the teacher? And finally, how was this conversation helpful for students in the classroom? The post-conference can be used for self-reflection and professional growth. This is also a time where the evaluator can ask additional questions about what was observed in the classroom. During the post-conference, the evaluator will share the evidence with the teacher and discuss an area of refinement and reinforcement for the teacher. Think about the following. As a teacher, what do you want and not want in a post-conference? What do you think the post-conference should look like? What should it sound like? On the next slide, you will observe a 4th grade ELA post-conference. The video clip length is 18 minutes, 38 seconds. When you are ready, move to the next slide in the presentation. Hover over the video and press play to view the clip. When you've finished viewing the video clip, proceed to the next slide.
So Laura, today we're gonna talk a little bit and get you to reflect a little bit about the lesson that I came in and observed the other day. And I want to give you an opportunity, first of all, to talk about it, but also to think about a strength of the lesson, because there was lots of strengths, and then an area that we might want to polish or strengthen a little bit, and then we'll talk about some next steps. And then we'll share your scores for the lesson at the end after we've had a good conversation. And it'll take about 15 or 20 minutes. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Any questions?
No.
All right. So let's just go ahead and kind of get into it. So as you reflect back on that lesson, I want you to think about what were some of the strengths of it, or just your general impressions of the lesson as you reflected.
Well, overall, I felt the lesson went well. I was very proud of the students, the way that they worked with their instructional groups and working cooperatively with one another. There was some really good conversation going on between group members. And even from start to finish, I felt like it was even a bonding experience with the whole class after looking at this lesson and looking at things from different perspectives and point of views. And the kids, even after the lesson, were giving me examples of, their everyday lives that they can apply this to. So I was really excited with that. As far as the actual academic focus with that inferencing, some kids, they struggled a little with it. And so I'm already making the mental notes and jotting down who I need to kind of pull a little more to give that solid foundation so that we can continue to work on making inferences and drawing those conclusions with our reading block. So overall, though, I was happy with the lesson and what the kids got out of it.
Great. So you noticed that the kids were really engaged and really getting into that lesson as you're reflecting back on it. And you noticed that maybe there was a few of the students had some struggles here and there, but overall, they really did kind of enjoy and take some good things away. So as you continue to reflect on this, I want you to think about for a moment, why is it important to consistently monitor your students' behavior and reinforce positive behaviors?
Well, even specifically for this lesson, there was a lot of group activities and instructional groups going on, and so as you saw, I was moving all over that classroom. At one point, I was in the front, the other was in the back. It was like, "Where's Miss Hill now?" But it's very important to monitor that because it's kind of like a snowball effect. I feel like once one student starts to get off with their behavior, it kind of starts trickling and it starts building and building and building. So I just make a very big point of it to make sure that if I need to stop it, I do it quickly with little time, little instructional time lost if possible. But to constantly be listening to what my students are saying with their group conversations, to be watching their body language, because and sometimes I can tell, okay, we're not doing what we should be doing over here because of your body language, or over here your face shows me that you were just utterly confused with what's at hand right now. So just to constantly be listening to those conversations and visually observing the students, I find is key, especially in our classroom, because we do so much group work. Like it's so important that the behavior is being monitored. And with the diverse classroom, with the ability levels and learning styles of my children, it's just I need to be there to facilitate if I need to. So, and I just think with our culture of our classroom, it really lends itself to that family culture, because I have students that do feel comfortable making mistakes in our classroom because they know I'm not going to tolerate a student making fun of them or, making them feel inferior. So it also lends itself to our classroom culture, too.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important because the students feel safe, and it creates that environment that all of you can learn together and grow together. And that was just so obvious in the lesson. And I want you to stop and think for a moment, what might happen if you didn't do those things?
Well, I have some strong personalities in that room right now that are popping in my head. And I think it would change that culture. It would change our culture from being a positive, safe culture to one that I won't have my students participating as much. I don't think that the collaboration between the groups would run as smoothly. Basically, I think the learning would just break down. And, those expectations and those goals that I would set for lessons, students would not be able to accomplish them because behavior is getting in the way.
And oftentimes that is exactly what happens. The learning stops because the culture's broken and the teacher's not there monitoring and supporting students. And again, that was a strength in this lesson. Some evidence that I have that speaks to that is throughout the lesson, the students were engaged in the activities that you assigned to them, both in the whole group and the small group setting. Through the lesson, you monitored student behavior by consistently walking around the room, talking with your students to ensure that they were adhering to the directions you had provided. You also used choral responses and signals like, I love cheeseburger, cheeseburger. Oh, it was fun. And you also would say class, and then say, yes, Mrs. Hill, to keep them on track and to keep them focused. And you also redirected your students when needed. For example, when little O'Reilly, when he was off task, immediately you just said Riley in a very firm voice, and he immediately got back to work. So it was obvious he knew those expectations. And when one group of students was not working according to their individualized specific roles, you quickly redirected them and you said, no, who's person one? Who needs to be writing? And by consistently monitoring your students' behavior and by reinforcing those positive behaviors with your smiles, your head nods, your affirmations, your students are able to enjoy learning in your class because they feel so safe and cared for. So I urge you to continue to do that because, it makes even me, I don't want to leave your room. It makes me feel at home when I'm there with you.
Well, we're family. We are. We start from day one, so.
Yeah, and that's so important, so important. And then when you're asking them to do the difficult things.
Right.
Yeah. And so as we kind of transition or shift gears, there was so many positive things that were going on in the room. Let's talk for a little bit about, and you mentioned this a little earlier when you were speaking about some of the students, you were concerned that maybe they might struggle just a little bit, and so talk a little bit about what you noticed in terms of your students and where maybe there was a little bit of a challenge for some.
Well, I'd mentioned in our pre-conference that we had just been looking at the skills of character traits and point of view in isolation. And so this was the first time that we were taking those skills and trying to combine them together to, have the students form these inferences and draw these conclusions. And so an area that I did find a few of them struggling was trying to bridge that gap in between it. And it was okay. And, I tried to do a lot of modeling kind of in the beginning of the lesson of, what Mrs. LaRue would be thinking in this aspect and why. And I tried to go around group to group and ask some questions here and there. But after thinking about it and reflecting on it, just my students are not only, they need to hear it, but they also need to see it. So I think now that I'm reflecting on it, I think just kind of giving them some type of visual, like an anchor chart or something to kind of guide their thinking where they take a character trait of a character and the point of view that character might be coming to a scenario with, and being able to give them little question starters to help them form those inferences, I think might help some of those struggling students. Because I noticed it, whole group, it was brought up when some of them just couldn't get the idea that Mrs. LaRue would, what would she say here, or, what would Ike's reaction be here? And then I heard it small group a little too, so...
So you were noticing that there was some misunderstandings by some of the students, and you're thinking that maybe providing them a little bit more support, might be helpful to them as you go through. And it's so important, like you said, to anticipate those things that might be happening with those student understandings, and then some techniques to kind of mitigate that. So let me give you some evidence, and you've already spoken to some of it because you're so with it when you're teaching. But some things that were noticed were in the lesson, you did anticipate some possible student misunderstandings by providing models for your students to show them your expectations. However, there were those points where some students really did struggle with making that inference. And so as we think about it, some of the students really struggled even in the beginning, in the whole group setting there, when you asked them, what would Mrs. LaRue say? What did I say when I modeled it for you? And a student responded that Miss LaRue would say, Dear Ike, I think prison is the best thing for you. And you redirected the student by saying, it's not prison, what is it? What are we going to do, punish him? No, I would say, you told them, Ike, I've sent you to the best dog academy in the United States, and I know it will make you such a better dog. And as you continued on and were working with the students, they still struggled a little bit in trying to make that bridge. Like you said, those skills kind of coming together. It was difficult for some. Furthermore, in the smaller groups, some of the students struggled when the group you worked with Dr. Wilfrey, the Dr. Wilfrey group, and it was so cute. I mean, they said, well, you're now Dr. Wilfrey, you told them. What would he say about Ike whimpering like that? And a student said, he'd say, you're a faker.
Yes, that was Elisa.
Yeah. And then you responded, so you think he's faking? Do you think he's faking, Caleb? Do you think he's really sick? You told them, and let's go back and think of it as if you're Dr. Wilfrey. Okay, you're Dr. Wilfrey, you told them. You have a medical degree. What would you say to Ike if you were Dr. Wilfrey and he complained about his paw hurting? And students still, even with those great guiding questions you were pushing them to, they still were just not quite there. So I'm going to suggest to you just a model or some things that perhaps you could try that might strengthen this. Because making a simple inference requires students, to use those text clues and their background knowledge, and all of those other skills are coming together, and smoke's coming out their ears, and it's difficult. Some students just need some very explicit model to assist them in making that inference. When you model with students, it's helpful if you identify the process that you're going to be using. So making that thinking visible for them by having students identifying those questions maybe that you're going to ask yourself, making that just super explicit for them so that as they go through it, they'll understand that, oh, I can ask myself these questions. And you were onto something really good there with a visual.
Yeah.
Visually posting those questions. Some questions I thought about that could be helpful that you might want to think about using would be something like, what do I know about this character? Before you go into the role model of Mrs. LaRue, thinking to yourself, now, what do I know? What does Miss Hill know about this character? What do I know? And then thinking like, if I were the character, how would I feel about Ike and why? So just kind of thinking those questions aloud, having them visually, like you mentioned, with an anchor chart or something, would be really helpful. So as students got to that place where they were doing it on their own, they first had done the thinking step that they needed to bridge that. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, definitely. Like I already have a poster in my head.
Yeah, I knew you would. I already got it in your head.
Okay.
So as you think about those suggestions that we just discussed, how could you use that in a future lesson?
Well, I think definitely to keep with the modeling, throughout the lesson and stuff, but to make sure that I'm identifying that these might be some misunderstanding or struggles that my students may face. So just be ready for something like a visual to know that I shouldn't just verbally communicate it. I also need to show them and something that they can refer to when I leave them and go work maybe with another group or something.
Yeah.
So, and I think with that higher order inference thinking, focusing, I heard you say how and why, so talking about developing your character first and then focusing on, how would they feel, and then why would they feel it? I think those are two powerful question words that would help guide their thinking a little better.
And like you said, that visual is going to make such a huge difference
Big time.
for those kids. And then you can work with the other, students as you differentiate and do what you need to do. It'll really help them. And by doing that, it's also going to increase their understanding overall and push student achievement up as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also another thing is with some of my gifted kids, I was a little disappointed with they weren't as descriptive when they were trying to draw their inferences. And so I think this would help them as well, kind of dive deeper into it.
And really thinking about those character traits and pulling all of that together at once.
Yeah. Because
that's tricky.
That's
That's really tricky for kids, but as more and more is required of them, our teaching has to rise to the occasion, which yours always does. So
thank you.
Yes. So as we think about this, so why is it so important to think about and anticipate possible student misunderstandings and develop teaching techniques to mitigate concerns? Why is that important?
Well, it lets me know, I know as a teacher with my kids, where they're going to struggle. And I think for me, it's very important in my pre-planning process that, while I'm developing my lessons, that I make points that I may have to stop here and do additional modeling or questioning. And also just be ready in case I need to do something with more of a visual. But I think it lends itself to that pre-planning especially. And then when I'm teaching the lessons, to realize that if I need to stop here and kind of reinforce either certain students or even whole group, I might have to.
Yeah.
So I don't know, because I don't want my students to be frustrated. And I know that when they have these misunderstandings that they become frustrated with the learning. And that's not my goal at all. My goal is I want them to feel successful with their learning. So if I can anticipate where some of these misunderstandings and struggles might come, hopefully I can have some stuff to give them to help them persevere through it, you know.
Yeah, so it's going to be important in that pre-planning piece to
Definitely.
think through where are the challenges and how can I anticipate if it's going to be a lot of higher order thinking.
Right.
What could I do? And even in the moment as you're going around, if you're noticing those struggles, like you said, to stop and pull them together and say, let me give you some additional scaffolding
Yes,
to help.
definitely.
in
That's
that case.
scaffolding. That was the next word I was thinking. I was like, what is it called? Oh, it's scaffolding. Yes.
Scaffold up. Exactly. Okay, so I want to tell you too, as tomorrow, I'm going to stop by your class, and I'd like us to have a conversation about the kinds of support you feel like you might need as you're implementing this.
Great.
From me, anything that I can do to help you. And also, before we move into sharing scores, I want you to think about for just a minute, what were some of the good things you heard today in our conversation?
I heard that my students were engaged in the lesson and working collaboratively with one another. And they tried to dive into a higher order thinking skill. You know, some struggled, but I feel that I have some tools that I can give them to put in their backpack, you know, that they can fall back on, kind of developing that character and asking the how and why. I'm going to make sure I make a visual of it. But I really feel like they have some tools that they'll be able to use as we continue our unit on, especially with this skill that's, you know, causes them to really think, causes us to think. So
Causes us all to think.
Yes.
Yeah. So taking that and knowing that the things that you've really adapted into your practice and changed in your practice, such as your managing of your classroom and that culture, it really does allow you now to build on your own practice and incorporate those strengths into helping your students grow more. So I just thank you for the work you're doing with our kids.
Thank you.
And so now, as we kind of wrap that up, let's go ahead and let's just share your scores and talk a little bit about the scoring process. Okay?
Now take a few moments to reflect on these questions. What did you notice as you observed the post-conference? How was the conversation helpful for the evaluator? How was it helpful for the teacher? What changes might we expect to see for the students as a result of the post-conference? You have completed the online training module. By completing all of the activities, you should have developed a procedural knowledge and understanding of the South Carolina teaching standards and moved to a conceptual understanding, and gained an understanding of the evaluation process, expectations, and protocols that will be used by evaluators. You are not expected to be an expert at using the rubric yet, but as you apply the rubric, you will be more comfortable using it with teachers and to reflect on your own instruction. Thank you for engaging in the SCTS 4.0 online teacher training. If you have additional questions about any part of the rubric or would like additional training, please contact your university supervisor. Before you exit this training, please click the training feedback box to complete the training feedback form.